This is the plaintiff, Stephen. He says he's a business consultant, and he was hired by the defendant to advise him on the sale of his business and on other business-related activities. He sent the man an invoice. The louse simply refuses to pay it. He's tired of being pushed around and is suing for the $5,000 he's owed. This is the defendant, Hal. He says he asked the plaintiff a question about selling one of his pawn shops. And instead of a one-word answer, the guy launched into a 1-hour, one-sided conversation. The plaintiff seems very intelligent, but also very lonely, so he let him go on and on and on. Next thing he knows, the guy sends him a bill, which shocked him because he was never told he was going to be billed for the phone call. Now the guy wants $5,000. Ha! He's accused of not paying for services rendered.
All parties, please raise your right hands.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Next case on the docket. The plaintiff is a business consultant, gave the defendant a lot of advice and got stiffed. But the defendant says he simply asked the plaintiff a question, and the plaintiff went on and on and on and then charged him. It's the case of ain't nobody's business.
Be seated. Come to order, please. Litigants have been sworn, Your Honor.
Thank you, Douglas.
You're welcome.
Okay, Stephen, you and your company are suing Hal. You and your company. Neither one of you want your company's name nor your last name's name.
You can mention my website.
Hal and Stephen, you are suing his pawn shop for $5,000 in fees that you believe he owes you, $250 for an hourly rate, and the rest for punitive damages for not paying you. You are the owner of a business consulting firm, correct?
Correct.
All right, tell me exactly what you do.
For more than 30 years, my company has provided business consulting services. Initially, it was a business and tax consulting firm in New York City, and I left New York and got involved in the internet.
Okay, so how did you meet the defendant?
I had provided some very useful services to his dad 5 years ago.
In the pawn business as well?
In the pawn business as well.
Okay, and more or less, what did you do for him? Marketing?
It was marketing and website development and marketing.
Okay.
And
so he then met you that way and hired you to do what for him?
His father called me up and recommended his son with trepidation.
Recommended his son with trepidation recommended to you his son with trepidation?
Yes. He said, my son needs your services. He's going to be difficult to deal with. He's impossible to deal with regarding money, and you should be aware of that before you take the assignment.
Okay. And so he hired you to do what?
He hired me last January to do two things, of which I completed one, and we didn't proceed with the second. The first one was to develop his website, which was satisfactorily completed to his satisfaction. And he paid a small excess fee for the extraordinary amount of extra time he demanded.
How much did he pay you entirely?
Roughly $3,000.
Okay. All right. And then what occurs that brings you to court now?
In September, he called me to advise him on how to deal with his father was selling his shop.
His father was selling his own shop?
Yes.
Okay.
And he wanted to know how to handle the website and all of the page one rankings on Google. Can he get extra money out of it? Can he redirect the traffic to his existing website? What would be the best way to do this to maximize the value of the sale?
I don't understand. What did you call him and ask him about?
I wanted him to build a website for me.
No, that's done. What did you call him later in September and ask him about?
It took place I have the phone records. It took place at the end of August. And basically it was a one-word question. And he had emailed me.
What was the question?
The question was, when my father sells the store, that he does not have rights to it. If he still has
What do you mean he does not have rights?
Well, when you sell a business, a lot of times.
Yeah, okay. If he sells a store, what?
It was at 9 at night, and Steve had emailed me and been corresponding with me over the last few months. He sent me an article from the New York Times 4 days earlier. So I felt comfortable. Hey, Steve, you just sent me an email. I called him up. I said, Steve, if my dad can keep his website, can we make use of it? And it was a yes or no answer. Well,
if my dad can keep his website,
Correct.
After he sells it to another,
Sells the
not
business.
the website, but the business to another guy.
I found out the next morning that the website was part of the sale. So I called him up. Then I told him, I said, Steve, don't even think about it. My dad can't use the website, so it's no longer an issue.
What did he answer you that night when you called him?
The word was yes, but if you know Steve, there's never a yes. It's usually a long, drawn-out conversation.
So what did he say?
He said, yes, you can use it, but we actually talked about the pawn business. He asked me some things about the pawn business. So it was a conversation. We had a good relationship.
You didn't expect to be billed?
Of course not.
Was there another phone call that you had with him as well?
Yes.
And when was that?
That took place on September 17th.
Okay.
And that was that my partner in one of my pawn shops was dealing with the Yellow Pages about a domain name. And Steve and I both agreed that dealing with the Yellow Pages when it comes to internet is probably a mistake. You have no choice but for them with print because they're the only ones out there, or Yellow Book. But when it comes to internet, so I actually told my partner, you know what, let me call Steve and see if maybe he'd want to do something because I think we're going to get a much better bang for our buck. So I called him up. I actually emailed him. He asked me, I told him there's some contract that they emailed me. He says, well, why don't you email me the contract, which I did. And
why would you not though? Okay, but the guy has to eat, and he has always charged you before, and you charge an hourly rate, right?
No.
No. Okay.
The website was a flat rate. The phone calls were an hourly rate.
Had you ever discussed an hourly rate with him?
I discussed the fact that he would be billed. I would also like to...
Did you discuss what he would be billed?
I told him I would send him a bill for $125. Also, the content...
In which conversation? Because there's two, right?
Each of two conversations.
In each of them, you told him, by the way, I'm going to charge you $125 for the information I just gave you, or I'm going to give you.
After the first phone call, I told him I was sending him an invoice for my time. At the beginning of the second phone call, I told him, I'm hanging up the phone since the first bill wasn't paid. He said, don't worry, send me a bill, I will pay it. And the fact is I sent him a bill, and then when I called him and said I haven't received payment, he said I was just joking.
I have a question. You had not agreed on a price before the phone call. It's after the phone call, you told him, I'm going to charge you X for this phone call. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And by the way, Your Honor,
I'd like to know if what was in your head when you called a guy twice for advice on something and you wanted to, or you expected to be a freebie. Aren't you worried about making that clear with each other?
I consider it a business development call. I was calling Steve to see if we could do business again.
No, you had a specific question for him. I mean, that's not, hey, let's come and talk because I want to hire you for something. That's a business development call. When you call a guy and say, this is my problem, I need an answer, what do you think I should do? You're asking him his advice.
Yeah, but I asked him a yes or no question.
That's still his advice.
Okay,
I mean, if I ask my lawyer a yes or no question, you know how I call my lawyer? When I call my lawyer, if I have a lawyer for a specific issue and I call my lawyer and he goes, how are the kids? I gotta listen, no unnecessary chit chat, you're on a clock.
Right.
Because I know it's gonna be unnecessary chit chat. You know, when you call somebody for professional advice, why would you think it's free?
So this defendant had used this plaintiff in the past. So you call somebody up and you ask them what you think is going to be a quick question. Can they automatically charge you if their business is giving this kind of advice? What do you think?
I guess technically so. I don't think that's right, though.
Why?
If there's a previous friendship in business.
No, it wasn't a friendship. It was a business relationship.
I guess technically so. I personally wouldn't do that, though.
You personally would starve to death because you wouldn't make a living. What do you think? What do you think?
I say it's intellectual property. I say it costs money. Because you got to
okay, I kind of get that.
Business is business.
If you ask a quick question and then they have a long drawn out answer, can they charge you for the long drawn out answer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you could cut them off.
Business.
Got your point? Going inside the courtroom.
First of all, if it's not going to be free, I'd like to be told how before we continue.
Okay, and I would like for you guys to, before you talk to each other, have a price per hour and have a signed contract so that I don't have to go through it. But life isn't perfect.
But you know
so
what?
Now what I have to resort to is figuring out what an appropriate expectation was. When you guys don't have an agreement in writing beforehand, it doesn't mean that you get to pick his brain for free. It means that you folks have very unwisely left it to me to decide what somebody's time is worth. Now, what is it you want to show me?
To correct the mistake.
And what, you're not suing for $250, you're suing for $5,000 because the rest of it you're suing for punitive damages. And
Yes.
why is that?
The first time that I did for a flat fee his website, the amount of time it took me was so fun. And I told him I was
Tough for you. If you underbid it, you underbid it. That doesn't mean that because you're angry with him later, you get to charge more. That wouldn't be why you get punitive damages. All right, guys, here's how we're going to resolve it. First of all, this is not a punitive damages case. This is a case where you're angry. Your anger does not make a punitive damages case. This is simple breach of contract, and it's really what we call in the law a quantum merit case because you don't have a contract. You don't have a specific contract. So what we have is a professional who has charged you always for his services. He has never given you his services for free. And then we have another professional who would like to see what he can get without having to pay for it and says, well, it's business development. Oh, yeah. And that's fine. That is how you're a businessman. I get it. But now that it's in front of me, I just have to call it. And I don't call this business development. I call this, you have two specific questions. You asked him the two specific answers because you wanted the specific answers from him because you didn't have the answers. And you cannot expect that you're not going to get charged for that. So I am going to order you to pay $200 for the plaintiff's services. Verdict for the plaintiff, $200.
So the judge rules that was not business development, that was billable time. What's your reaction to this?
I guess I have a difference of opinion with the judge.
I guess so. Well, why don't you specify these things in advance and know what you're being charged for, ask what you're being charged for, and how much?
Well, the whole point of it was that he did not ask. He did not say he was billing me, and that's why I was upset when I got billed without being told so.
You're thinking like, aha, I can talk to him as long as I want?
No, I was thinking that we have a relationship that if anybody calls anybody, like even if I call my attorney and I talk to him, if he says, Hal, I have to bill you for this, he's going to tell me that. In this case, it didn't happen.
You still want to work with him?
Probably not, but who knows? You never know what the future will bring.
Business. Okay, head right down this way. Here with Officer McIntosh. All right, so this is not a punitive damages case. You come out with $200 after suing for a lot more. Are you going to work with this dude anymore?
No.
Harvey?
You know, when the contract isn't perfect, but one party performs a valuable service, the judge can award the reasonable value of the services rendered.